Hey, good afternoon. The markets have cooled off quite a bit after the craziness of last week. We've got inflation data coming out again. We have the start of jobs week, which I will share as a little bit of a tip of the cards. Maybe not a good start, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. And plus, we have a great question of the week all about when or what to look for when you are hiring an accountant or a CPA. I hope everyone's enjoying this little bit of a breather. As I had mentioned last week, as we all know, was crazy in the markets. And this week we seem to be not only a little calmer, but also creeping up a little bit, which obviously is a good thing for many reasons. But anyways, I'm Brandon Steele, financial advisor with Mainsail Financial Group here in Bellevue. And our goal is every week on Thursday to bring to you some of the market news, the data, the trends we're watching, and hopefully weed out a little bit of the noise that we all kind of see week after week. So let's get right into things here. And this week I want to start in a little different tone. I want to talk a little bit about earnings. Obviously, last week we saw a lot of that volatility come into play based around a lot of macro strategies. Fast forward to this week, the last day of January, first week of February here. And the good news is that we're seeing a lot of earnings coming in. A lot of them, the companies are starting to report and coming in pretty dang strong. So what's exciting is that I think we're starting to see fundamentals maybe outweigh some of the, I don't want to say noise, but some of the macro strategies that have been or macro considerations that have been the focus for at least last week, but really what seems like for the last few years. Fundamentals hopefully may be an important aspect of stock market considerations in 2022 here. And I think this week may be a sign of that, right? Last week, we're all focused on the Fed, what the Fed's going to do, and the markets, kind of did what they did. This week, we're seeing companies reporting strong earnings, which is why we invest. And for that, we're seeing some of those companies do very well, right? So hopefully that's the case moving forward, but I think it is good to see and hopefully the sign of maybe a little more leg to come from the growth side of it. Switching gears here a little bit, let's talk about data. So core PCE inflation came out on Tuesday, I believe it was, up 0.5% month over month and just under 5%, 4.9% year over year. So big surprise. I feel like I'm on repeat every month when we talk about inflation, but the expectations were lower than the numbers came in. So, here we are again. I literally feel like I'm just like pounding my fist here. Inflation is here. It's probably going to be here. In fact, in Europe, I believe it was the inflation number came out to Wednesday, and it was the highest that they've seen yet. So, inflation is definitely a consideration. And even with all this talk about the Fed raising rates, it doesn't mean that inflation will go away tomorrow. Yeah, it may help to tame things a little bit, but just by raising rates doesn't mean that, prices are just going to stop increasing. It's very likely that we'll be experiencing this for some time. With that, let's spend some time talking about jobs because we have some disappointing numbers and more jobs data to come later this week. But let's start with Tuesday. On Tuesday, we had job openings numbers come out, and the number was very high. It was 10.9 million job openings. So even higher than last month, and obviously not a good sign of how many spots there are to fill, so to speak. And in addition to that, we fast forward to Wednesday, where ADP employment reports came out, and believe it or not, we saw a negative 301,000 jobs number. That's right, negative, right? So going backwards. In other words, through the month of January, what this is telling us is that 300,000 jobs were cut, essentially. Obviously, we've been following this trend very carefully, very closely, and jobs have been increasing. The number of jobs have been increasing. We've been hoping to see more people get back into the labor force, especially with that 10.9 million job openings number. But this is not a good sign. Now, what I will share is that the ADP employment report is not typically seen as like the number, the data point to follow for the jobs information. But a lot of times it can be seen as a kind of a leading indicator of what's to come on Friday, which is the non-farm payrolls. So get ready. Next Thursday, we'll be talking all about what comes out on Friday, but that will be very, very important to watch. And hopefully what we've seen Tuesday and Wednesday is not a trend or a sign of what's to come on Friday with non-farm payrolls. All right. With that, we're going to transition here a little bit, talk about our question of the week, which is A great one. In fact, it's something I get all the time from clients, from folks I'm sitting down with for the first time, from friends, family, you name it, which is, when should I hire an accountant, and what do I look for when the time comes? And I think to answer the first part of when to maybe consider hiring an accountant, there's two broad considerations with that. The first is complexity, right? How complex is your situation that may or may not dictate a CPA could be able to help and provide some value. The second is use of time, right? If you're spending hours and hours working through your taxes, possibly, maybe it might be worthwhile hiring somebody to help you with that, so that you can either focus on something that maybe increases your income, or maybe just frees you up to spend more time doing the things that you don't get enough time doing in the first place. Maybe it's with family, maybe it's golfing, for instance, just for instance. But anyways, the idea here is that there can be multiple considerations when looking for an accountant, but those two categories may sum it up a little bit. When I first started in this industry, I hired an accountant right out of the gate, and it wasn't necessarily because my situation was complex. In fact, I was earning next to nothing. But what I thought that it allowed me to do is to free up my time to do my taxes, to go out and hopefully meet some folks and try and build my business, build my practice. So I think that is a very, a very solid reason to look at hiring an accountant. On the other side of it, you may have complexity. Now my business is very, very dramatically different than where it was when I started. Now things are a little more complex, right? And now we have an accountant for very different reasons, but it drives back a lot of value, that's for sure. So I would say the easiest way to define complexity, maybe if you think about having, basically when you file, if you have more than one schedule, right? So maybe it's for real estate, maybe it's for a trust. I don't know. But if you have more than one schedule you're filing, that's where you may start to think even more seriously about a CPA or an accountant. Some good examples of that complexity might be real estate holdings, right? Maybe you have some rental property or some investment property that you hold for investment purposes. Maybe you have stock options. Maybe you are working for one of the tech companies, and stock options are a big consideration as far as when to sell and how that impacts taxes and all that good stuff. Maybe you're considering alternative, or have to deal with alternative minimum taxation, AMT. Maybe you're a business owner. Maybe again, you have trusts or a trust where you have to file for that entity. All those things may be good reasons to start considering a CPA. And often if you do find that, there's a lot of times that, number one, it frees up your time, but number two, they may be able to provide more than enough value back to you versus the fee to work with a CPA in that type of scenario. So hopefully that helps. What I will do is I'm going to include the link to a more detailed blog we shared on the same topic here in the comments as well. So go ahead and take a look at that if that's helpful. Otherwise, let me know if you have anything on your mind, and I will be happy to answer it in our question of the week. And we'll see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. for all things jobs related. So get ready, and let's hope Friday is a little bit better on the jobs front than we saw on Wednesday.